When it comes to talking about story-driven games in a critical context, it can be difficult for one to explain its successes and shortcomings without giving away certain plot elements that lends itself to the overall experience. In fact, games such as this isn't something I would ever wish to attempt in giving my thoughts on, as it's more beneficial for the player to experience it themselves. But after playing this game developed by Giant Sparrow, I immediately felt compelled to write my feelings towards it. But to save time for those who have been wondering if they should give this 2 to 3 hour title a go, I will say that if you enjoy games such as Firewatch, Gone Home, or Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, I almost guarantee that there is something great to get out from playing this. But even for those who are skeptical or even look down upon the concept of a walking simulator, as they are cynically called, What Remains of Edith Finch breaks expectations and attempts to see what is possible for the player to directly interact into what is widely regarded as a passive genre and displays the most unfortunate circumstances with the utmost sincerity and grace. You play as the titular character Edith Finch, who returns to her remote childhood home after years of abandonment from an unfortunate event. It's believed that they bear a family curse which relates to the mysterious and untimely deaths of family members, but each room is preserved in memory of them and a new one is built as another is brought into the world. Everywhere you go, the house is densely filled with books, furniture and miscellaneous items that create some depth to each family member that you read about. Even small trinkets are placed acting as in-game references. The preserved nature of his residence gives it an eerie atmosphere, but at the same time a sad one, as Edith talks about her personal memories living there, mentioning family secrets, anecdotes about other members, and small details. Although it's ultimately a linear experience, What Remains does grant you enough freedom to observe your surroundings in finer detail. I felt completely drawn in as I slowly paced myself through the corridors and rooms of the Finch house, taking it all in, investigating every nook and cranny. It made me reminiscent of Gone Home, where it's set in a large empty house full of secret passageways, but where that's a tale focusing on a single relative, the amount of interactivity you have with objects compared to Edith Finch is huge but deliberate. You play as someone's sister in Gone Home, rummaging through the recently moved in abode to find answers about her disappearance, but in this, you're a small part of a bigger picture. The interactivity when you play as Edith is limited to peering into the peepholes of doors that have been sealed away or opening secret entrances to further her journey. You act as if you are a ghost, slowly wandering through the environments, observing what was once home to 4 generations after years of never fully knowing all these people. As you travel through this game, Edith narrates your journey with lines of text casually guiding you through this empty residence to create a relaxing segue into each family member's story. It's never anything too heavy, and you never have to read paragraphs of dialogue to get the most out of it, which makes it more welcoming to players who aren't so keen on upsetting the pace. It's utilised very well, and I never felt like it was pulling me away from anything. The way it gives you bits of narration from each section of the house you explore gives you control on how you want to set the pace, but due to the lack of a sprint button, this isn't a story that is to be rushed. The detailed cel-shaded look we often see in this subgenre is a welcome addition to What Remains, as Giant Sparrow delivers some fantastic visuals, making you feel like there is still life within the walls and the past events embodied inside passages and other mediums you find throughout this title. The layout of the house is linear in its design, but it never made me feel I was being strung along for the ride, as I felt like I was discovering these hidden paths for myself, leading me onto another member's room. Even though there are sentences floating around to guide you, the sense of natural progress was still tangible to me. And inside these rooms lies notes that you read which puts you in control of the respective family member, either it be written by or about that very person. The words from the pages teleport you into their perspective to relive the last moments of each of these people's lives, and while the concept may sound harrowing at first, it blends reality and fantasy in a fascinating fashion. There's a wealth of variety in terms of setting, control methods, and even the presentation, as not all of these events are written on paper. One is through an animated flipbook where you need to squeeze the R2 button in order to make the pages turn, whilst another is presented in a comic strip, similar to the style of Creepshow, as you play as a has-been horror movie star being stalked by a mysterious killer whilst the Halloween theme music is playing in the background. Yeah, this is a personal favourite of mine. Even though the event does take place in 1960 whilst the film premiered in 1978, but that is something I can forgive. Even though you're playing the events leading up to their demise, The cause of death are sometimes never properly established, which lends to the mysterious aspect of the supposed family curse the Finches share. I like to think that what you're seeing in these stories isn't necessarily through the eyes of the character, but through Edith's as she interprets in what is being presented to her as she's reading. Most of the events that take place in these notes and letters she reads either happens in the room she finds them or just outside of the family house. Because of her limited knowledge about these people, it can be forgiven for her to imagine a manner of things being seen by this individual at that time. Whether or not what's happening to them is 100% true isn't necessarily the whole point. It's more or less, since they're already dead, rounding off the edges to soften the blow about losing somebody is a normal reaction to something so terrible, even if she never saw that relative in person. I think what I'm trying to get at is through the multitude of control methods, it not only makes each story memorable, but also an intimate exploration with that person. They're dedicated to that single relative, representing them through the mannerisms of a controller and its narration. In Gregory's story, for example, you're not even controlling him, rather you're moving a bath toy frog leaping in and out of the water, giving you a sense of the infant's imagination and untethered joy. Whereas in contrast with Walter's story, you're sat in an underground bunker doing the same action of opening a can of peaches, but what's great is how my initial uncertainty with how to control the movement resembles his own anxiety and survival. As his letter talks about how he gotten used to it, I in turn became accustomed to the controller inputs myself. I think what we're really interested in is exploring a moment, like finding something that, in the case of What Remains of Edith Finch, has this simultaneous feeling of something very beautiful, but also a little unsettling. Whilst you witness a handful of the family's deaths over the course of the game, the real importance is how wonderfully executed the majority of these stories are, pardon the pun. As mentioned before, gameplay changes with each story, and it adds a level of interactivity which makes it all the more immersive. This is the game's biggest strength, and what separates itself from other titles in this subgenre is that it focuses on experimenting with specific mechanics to each character in its anthology of passing. We're not playing as some faceless person whose legs you can't see, walking around aimlessly on an empty island, holding up on the control stick, listening to paragraph after paragraph of ambiguous dialogue, which makes things confusing and unengaging in its storytelling. Although you don't get to see these people's faces during gameplay, you do get a glimpse of their appearance through the sketches in Edith's journal and various photographs in the house. But with a variety of members you encounter, not all of them are successful in their execution, but their impact, both good and bad, will be different to everyone that plays this. The only story I had trouble with was when I had to take photographs when my character was out in the country. However, at one point I couldn't find what I was meant to be taking a picture of in order to progress the vignette. This was as bad as it got for me in my playthrough, yet it didn't frustrate me thanks to the wonderful soundtrack composed by Jeff Russo. Having composed many TV shows such as Legion, American Gothic, and Fargo, this is Russo's first composer credit for working on a video game, and certainly one that left an impression on me. Since this game centres around the ambiguity of death, mystery and memories, the score has a classical motion led on by a sympathetic piano motif that plays through the majority of what remains. Initially it's slow paced, allowing for lots of breathing room to come to terms with these people's passings. Woodwind instruments such as the oboe serves a homely feel once you look around the empty rooms, making you feel welcome, but as the piano repeats itself in slow succession, you could interpret it as the faded memories that once belonged here. It's a downplayed track overall, and it can be forgiven for one to think that this is just another emotional score pasted onto the background of another walking simulator. But with notable tracks such as Milton's Tower and Lewis's Coronation, it certainly lends itself to be a character of its own. Running with the method of giving each member's story its own identity, the soundtrack gives them their own theme in this regard, albeit some more memorable than others. But in between these segments where you journey towards the next unturned page and sealed door, the music changes its weight and confidence through the psyche of Edith, yet keeps the underlining melancholic tone of sadness and grave misfortune. It's only dramatic when it needs to be, where it crucially captures the overwhelming nature of someone departing from us. A rush of orchestral swelling from the strings makes a lasting impression, only to then fade away as you're brought back into Edith's shoes as she makes another entry into her journal's family tree. Not all of the music is original, however. As mentioned earlier, they used a Halloween theme for Barbara's story, and also Tchaikovsky's Waltz of the Flowers in Gregory's. The music shifts this way effortlessly, making a great soundtrack overall that has a dynamic range in tone, but a progressive one in mood. I certainly look forward to see if Russo works on any other video game projects in the near future. I hope I haven't given too much away from the game's plot apart from its premise, as it's a title that ought to be played without any prior knowledge. Granted, this can be applied to almost every game since there's always that element of uncertainty once you pick up a new title, but with this one it feels very special to me. It made me feel like I was whisked off onto a journey of the surreal and spectacular in the guise of everyday life. A study into the multiple minds of people, both young and old, telling their own outlook on life and love. Its presence is brief, but at least such an emotional impact on me, making it as long as a regular campaign would make it lose its charm. Death is one of the major staples in video games, and only some games have ever looked into this concept to give itself interesting mechanics and narrative devices, such as Rogue Legacy, Grim Fandango, and Dark Souls. But What Remains of Edith Finch settles itself into one game of celebrating life despite the sad nature of a loved one never coming back. It certainly helped me a little after facing something so terrible around the time that I played this. I feel grateful for this to even exist, and playing this makes me even feel more grateful to appreciate the ones that we love in life and beyond. What Remains is a magical piece of video game design that presents the fragility of existence, but also the beauty of imagination. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you all next time.